So recently, I have put out a video on Revelation 9, mostly about the Sixth Trumpet. This is a video that I have made probably 2 years ago at this point. And I've just sort of sat on it and thought, I don't know. But this video, how do I put this? My journey began with the trumpets. So I slowly was able to, or kind of quickly almost, figure out what, when, and where, what the trumpets were, what they represent. And that sort of, I think of that as like my Alice falling down the rabbit hole moment. And looking back and showing this video, it's very interesting because what everybody loves to say things like going down the rabbit hole, but if you really remember the book or even a little bit of from the Disney movie, Alice fell into the rabbit hole and she fell for fucking ever. She just kept falling and falling and falling and falling and falling. I think it was like days in the hole. Meaning it was not just like a quick descent. It was to go into the rabbit hole means you really went deep. And so what I find interesting is my understanding began with making these videos and sort of cracking some of the code. But what ended up happening is I kept falling for 2 more years. And so I have a different understanding of some of the words than when I made this, even though I find it still visually compelling. So I don't even disagree with it. It's just there's a whole nother section. So I just thought, let's talk about that. Let's peel back even more of the layers to make it even crazier than just simply being World War II, which it is definitely 100%, without question, not debatable, World War II. However, in the grand scheme of what all is occurring, there's more there's more going on. So I think we should take a look at the verses, explain some of the symbolism, and let it just fester in you as you fall down the rabbit hole. Alright, so if we take a look at chapter 9 of Revelation, we're skipping the fifth trumpet for now, even though it probably is the most responsible for breaking my brain into 1,000 pieces and making me let go. But we'll come back to that. It still to this day blows my mind every time I think about it. And so it's the sixth trumpet is about halfway down. It's, 9 verses, give or take, and it's the last of this series of trumpets. So we're not doing a full Revelation thing right now. I'm in the middle of a Jacob series, and then I just sort of wanted to break it up. I got busy, and then I thought, let me just throw this thing that I already have available out there, and then I thought, well, maybe I should explain it a little bit. But on the video, I found Johnny Cash reading, because he's way better than I am. But here it goes. Verse 13. Then the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar which is before God, saying to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. So the 4 angels who had been prepared for the hour and day and month and year were released to kill 1/3 of mankind. Now the number of the army of the horsemen was 200 million. I heard the number of them, and thus I saw the horses in the vision. Those who sat on them had breastplates of fiery red, hyacinth blue, and sulfur yellow. And the heads of the horses were like the heads of lions, and out of their mouths came fire, smoke, and brimstone. By these 3 plagues, 1/3 of mankind was killed by the fire and the smoke and the brimstone which came out of their mouths. For their power is in their mouth and in their tails, for their tails are like serpents, having heads, and with them they do harm. We're going to stop there, and I have another video that I posted that is just these 2 verses, and we'll get to that in a second. So, what I'm saying, so those are the, it's not even 9 verses, it's probably more like 6, 7, 7. 6 verses on the sixth trumpet. So I have listened to an unbelievable, and read and studied and poured into an unbelievable amount of Revelation theory. And if there's one thing that I can feel pretty good about, it's that people don't have a clue how to read Revelation. To say Revelation is symbolic is an understatement. But what I've discovered is that by understanding some of the symbology of Revelation, it occurs to you, if you're a smart person, that the whole Bible is actually kind of written this way. And all the phrases are the same phrases almost through the whole thing. I know they say they're not, but if you just here's what I did, and I explained it before, I'll explain it again, and it would help you if you thought like this. Just pretend nobody has a goddamn clue what the fuck they're talking about. And just empty your brain of all of the bullshit. And just think for yourself. Or in this case, ironically, I'm going to think for me, but you think for you. But just, it's almost unfathomable how many thoughts aren't your own.
And once I've got a computer concept of meaning, using this ridiculous way of assigning meaning, which is just angle.
Yeah.
I then ask, what word do you think comes next? And, this was used in advertising. For example, you would take a phrase that is naturally occurring and would link it to something that isn't naturally occurring. So, for example, Bud Light. If I said tastes great, what would you say?
I don't know.
The ad was less filling.
Oh yeah, less filling. Right.
Right. And so
right.
What happened was that you'd be over for Thanksgiving dinner and somebody would say, "Grandma, this tastes great." And somebody else would just, their brain would autocomplete, say less filling.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Right. So it roboticized us.
Yeah.
And these language models are basically doing that. If I say, "Good morning, it's great to see
you."
Right. So the idea is that it turns out more or less that this is a lot of what we do with our day. We think we're thinking, we think we're having conversations, but we're not.
Yeah.
We're just having these pre-programmed, pre-scripted interactions.
Yes.
And so the really big discovery is that we don't think.
Yes.
It's not that the computers are thinking. The really big discovery is that we're doing almost no thought.
Okay, great. Thank you for the explanation.
And in this case, we're not even necessarily trying to have an original thought as much as an interpretation of somebody else's thought. So that's interesting. It's just I think it's very difficult for modern people to get into an ancient mindset. And my rabbit hole journey is essentially leaving the present and disappearing into the past. As much of the past as I could get. And so, it's my contention that I have tripped upon some of these meanings. For example, like in the video, I'll even show you some clips of the video, but let's just relook at some of the things. Number 1, it's the sixth angel. The sixth angel. The sixth angel. What's the number of the beast? Numbers are pretty big in the Bible. Just saying. And you'll see that as we go throughout. So the fact that the sixth angel has blown this trumpet is kind of a little tell of some of who is going to do some of this and who's not. So just remember that it's the sixth angel. And this is like every word. So angel. angels kind of invoke fat babies with wings, white robe, beautiful blonde hair people with halos, good guys, God's army people. Like, angels has just a bunch of baggage. I think one of the standard definitions is messenger. But my understanding of angels and demons and all of these things are slightly skewed from the norm, I guess we'll say. So imagine I believe, especially in the book of Revelation, every other thing that's happening is an angel blowing a trumpet, an angel opening a bowl, an angel pouring out a bowl, and opening a scroll, whatever they're doing. Like, there's angels doing all kinds of things. If you're literal on this, I don't know how you can remain sane and read the book of Revelation and be literal. Like, your head should explode and you should just be a massive, like, boiled flesh. Like you're, it's not literal. There's no way there is not actually a halo guy blowing a brass horn instrument. It's not what it's saying, but it is saying that the angel is a messenger of it's like if a man is a country and if God is humanity and a woman is a belief, an angel is not a person, it's not a country, but it is kind of a spiritual force. So it's an idea. Yeah. So in this book, and the trumpets, just once you know what they are, and I think I've said it before, so I'll put this there and let it just stew. But the trumpets are like industrialization. It's the industrial world emerging from the ashes of the old European colonial world, and the act of going from European monarchical power to the nation state, Western Anglo-American centric, capitalistic, democratic republics. Like, that is a direct result of industrialization. And that led directly to like a Cold War, but it occurred before the Cold War, because if you have to be honest about World War I and World War II, I mean, nothing's like simple, but essentially you're looking at sort of the world coming to terms with how socialism and communism and capitalism were going to share space. How the people, like the average poor people and the powerful people, were going to organize, right? Who gets what share? And what, and ironically, kings don't survive World War I and World War II. And if you could, in many ways, they don't survive World War I. And I think in some ways, this isn't just World War II, but it's more World War II than World War I. I think it's summing up how industrialization led directly to a global conflict that reorganized human society. So angel, the sixth angel, this angel of the beast of the sea, and I have stated repeatedly, the sea is, it would be like capitalism. So like, there's a direct relationship to capitalism and the Sixth Trumpet. But it's not what you think it is, but it is exactly what you think it is. So, we're going to get past verse 1 here in a second. So then the six angels sounded. And I'll just skip sounded for right now. And I heard a voice from the four horns. And I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar, which is before God, saying to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, who was making the noise, release the four angels who were bound at the great river Euphrates. And if you can get your head around what I'm about to say, you can really begin to see what I'm trying to say. Like you can almost anticipate the next. Like it's a language. It's a non-literal language that's telling a story in advance of interesting things. Release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. So if you look at the symbolic meaning of four, there's four angels bound at the great river Euphrates. So number one, angels being bound. So we know Satan is bound, and Satan will be released, and he will create an army that is like this, that is as big as the sand of the sea. And then you see the beast of the sea rising out and standing on the sand of the sea, and you see Joseph and the 7 years of plenty with the sand of the sea. So there's this language that's occurring about large amounts. So that's one thing. The second thing is the number. So there's four angels, and there's not just four angels. There's four horns of the golden altar, saying to the four angels who are in the Euphrates, who are prepared for this day, and who are prepared for the hour, the day, the month, and the year. And there's a lot in that as well, and we'll have to go back and get to that. And how do I want to do this? So if I was to show you the video that I made, near the end, there's a moment where I'm saying, right, there's all these fours. So if we just play it, there's right here the four horns, the four angels, the four winds, the four rivers, the four corners of the earth, the world. Four, and this part of Revelation in general, has a bunch of fours. And what I'm trying to say, and what other people are saying, is that four represents earth. So this army is going to be released by these four angels on the four horns of the altar of God. That is like literally, that is like symbolically telling you world war. Like that's how you would say world war in esoteric language. Kind of a big one. So if you just want to say World War I and World War II are the same war, then you could just say the one war, right? The war with a break. One giant global what's another, like what else was occurring? Like the entire economic, political, like the whole power structure of Earth, the whole moral structure of Earth was just twisted immediately, changed. And one could argue that there's how far down the rabbit hole you want to go. It will tell you to what level that was accidental and to what level that was intentional. And to the level of intentional that you're willing to go into would be the level, like you can begin to see that I've related in previous videos, that this story is essentially the beginning. If you have Joseph's dream, Pharaoh's dream interpreted by Joseph, you had 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. And so the world wars are, like I said before, they're an attempt for the world to figure out how monopoly capitalism and industrialism and robber barons are going to cohabitate with Marxist socialist ideologies. And so, again, depending how far into the rabbit hole you want to go, you can even say that in the weirdest way possible, the rise of communism was equally funded by banking houses, the same ones that created capitalism. So if you wanted to talk about visions and interpreting visions, you could almost say that there's two different interpretations occurring of the same vision. Right? Somebody's guiding the world to a place, and they're using two methods. Is that true? Is that conspiracy theory? How far do you want to go? Like, even if you don't want to go there, what we're talking about is this is a world conflict begun by the sounding of a great movement, a great idea, the sixth great idea. If I told you what the other ones were, I released the one video about the first trumpet. And the first trumpet is essentially the advent of steam power, how you took coal and oil and began to burn them, and they created this new industrial base in which other things then came off of. And I don't want to get too sidetracked, but the sixth idea. So after steam power and global trade and electricity and the destruction of, like, globalism destroyed the wilderness, the green grass, the trees, like uncivilized places were all found and colonized, and all of the trees, all of the leaders were brought under the control of these European powers, and those European powers were then slowly eradicated by Republican ideals and democracy. And what is interesting in that, and that's what I said Joseph was, is that the United States, we are a democratic republic in the spirit of Greece and Rome. And Western democracy is touted as that, right? In the spirit of Greece and Rome and England and other, maybe loosely like the Confederation of the Holy Roman Empire, things of that nature. But North Korea is the Republic of North Korea. It is the People's Republic of China. The Soviet Union was like the Soviet Republic. That's the R in the USSR. So republics came in two forms. And Joseph had two children, and Revelation has two things happening. There are two beasts. There's a beast of the sea, and there's a beast of the land. There's earth. And if the sea is wealth and capitalism and global trade, then the land must be the opposite, even though they appear to be working in tandem. If you really want to understand Revelation, and if you really want to understand Revelation, you really need to dig into the back half of Genesis and plow through Exodus and realize that it is all the same story with extra layers for you to comprehend. In fact, most of the Torah, best I can tell, and I don't understand, this is where, man, we've gotten off on some crazy tangents. The best I can tell is it's telling you industrialization, modernization, post-modernization, today and the future a little bit in ways you can't begin to understand. And simultaneously, that story is older, so I'm not sure if there's just a big loop and you take the same words and you reinterpret. You're remaking an old movie with updated. I don't know or if the Moses story, because I can tell you this: when you get to Joshua, for sure, we are talking whatever happens after the Bronze Age collapse, before ancient Greece becomes the great power it is. And the Greeks have their myths of who's that? Like Perseus and all of these founding members and those myths. And so, like, in many ways, like, you can clearly see like the founding of Greece during the Dark Age, the Bronze Dark Age. Like, that's the beginning, even though, like, it leads you up there with Moses, but you can't find any of that in the history as well as you can find it now. And so very little of my rambling is going to make any sense unless I just say this, but I was hoping with Jacob that if I follow Jacob all the way from the beginning to the end, that you could watch this unfold. Well, Jacob, yeah, because Jacob dies after he returns to Joseph in Egypt. And just to give away the plot a little bit, and I'll explain it further, that when Benjamin and Jacob go to Joseph, that is World War II. And there's so many like little words. So it's like everything is important because of the words. And that's what I'm trying to show you here. So even though I just showed you on the video without me rambling, just a bunch of tanks and guns and as many things that look like serpents with heads creating fire and brimstone as I possibly could find, from tanks to flamethrowers to machine guns to rocket launchers to mortars. Like, holy shit, look at that. That visual thing is true, yet there's another one on top of that. And so today we're not talking about the obvious, because my journey began as when I went down the rabbit hole, I thought, oh, I've let go of my ideas. And I realize now that it takes years to unthink what you think to allow yourself to see what you can't see. So maybe as I'm talking to you, you're just going, what in the fuck is this guy talking about? This is the most ridiculous bullshit I've ever heard. And that's probably the right answer if you're living in the real world. But any sane person is going to seem insane in a world of insane people. So that's a lot there. I've gone off on many tangents to get to the river Euphrates. And that's the next thing I want to get to. So we said four horns of the golden altar is on one level representing the world in conflict because of a great power of industrialization and how that's unfolding. That's one. In another, let's take a look at this. It invokes four angels, invokes another four angels, and that would be the four angels of Ezekiel, where you had, I saw an angel with the head of a lion and an ox and a man and an eagle. Now, I haven't even remotely begun to tell you about Ezekiel because I thought I need to build you up with Jacob. So if you, and we were like 2 stories away from Ezekiel, because Ezekiel represents where you introduce the concept of Jesus into Jacob. Only Jacob had fled, and then he will wrestle with another angel, and then he will become Israel, and his hip will be pulled out. And it's from that moment on, the wrestling with the angel and the name change is simultaneously Ezekiel, the wheels of Ezekiel, what Ezekiel is, a Elijah, Jesus, Jacob, Europe, Rome, all that occurs before global colonialism and absolute monarchy run amok, and Republican revolutions and industrialization. And so, like, there's a buildup from Rome to America to World War II, and those stories are Jesus and Ezekiel and Elijah and Elisha. 4 angels that are released would be like the 4 angels. So metaphysically speaking, Euphrates means bursting forth or breaking out. And it's symbolic of blood, the bloodstream. Remember what we're talking about with the body and what the blood is. And so there's blood in Revelation. The blood becomes the blood of a dead man, and the dead man is capitalism. So it also means stability and nourishment. Stability, nourishment. So there's this idea that these angels, let's go back to that, these 4 angels, the 6th angel is releasing the 4 angels, which represent the world. So the 6th iteration of industrialization is going to release upon the world from the river of bursting out. From this new thing, you can call that abundance, and you could call that separation. So 2 things, it almost has 2 meanings. And then if you remember in that same chapter 16 in Revelation, when the blood becomes the blood of a dead man, the river Euphrates is dried up. And so that bursting forth, that abundance, is then drying up. And so what you end up getting is the opposite later down the road. So, because then you'll have the kings from the east have dried up the separation and the nourishment. And then it is at that moment of this thing that the Battle of Armageddon occurs and Jesus returns. And so there's way more into that. So I want to scoot ahead a little bit because I tend to give you too much at one time. I always promise myself I'm going to keep this short, and then in the end I just run on. So the reason these 4 angels had been prepared and released is to kill a third of mankind. Now, I told you I've looked at all the Revelation stuff there is to get a hold of, or as much as I could find at some point in my life. And if you've understood anything I've been saying, man is not man. Man is the collective people. It's like a man is a country in its easiest way to understand. So when you kill a third of mankind, you're talking about a third of countries. And an interesting thing that happens in the trumpets is if you kill a third of mankind and then you scroll down to where it says the rest of mankind. Well, if you subtract 1/3 from 100%, that leaves you the rest of mankind, who is going to continue on and didn't repent and still worships demons and idols of gold, silver, brass, stone, wood, and they didn't repent of their murders, their sorcery, their sexual immorality, or their thefts, right? So what's left over after 1/3 is removed. And you can see how this builds, and you really have to get your head around it. So if 1/3 is 33.3, the leftover is 66.6. So the 2/3 remaining are not killed. So it's interesting, and I'm working on this one, is dead and die is capitalism and wealth. So to kill, because the people that didn't die are obviously still in the capitalism system with their sorceries and sexual immorality and thefts. I mean, that's what was the big sin in the Soviet Union back in the day? It would be blue jeans and rock and roll music and Elvis Presley and the Beatles. Like, those are the demons they worship, their idols. Capitalism, Western culture, Rocky movies, Warner Brother cartoon, and there's a whole video that does the same thing as I did with the trumpets on that. So then that would mean this 1/3 that died, well, that got killed, was saved from the Western capitalism. So the 1/3 in this case would represent communism. And the curious thing that I can't give you a great explanation for because I didn't write this is as you go forward through Genesis and Exodus, and you realize that Moses is, and I guess a lot of that was for this point, Moses. And so this comes to me as I understand the words, not me looking for this, right? So every time I encounter this, I have to go, what the fuck? And then I throw something and I walk away for a couple days and I'm like, well, how does that make that? Because a portion of me has to just let go. And you don't realize how much you have vested in all of this until you just hear things that are just impossible to ingest. For example, and I can prove this with every word of the book of Exodus. And the first thing you have to do, that might be the hardest thing, it might be like literally, this might be a non-starter for most people. You have to take this current Jewish underpinning of everything and just, you're not condemning it, you're not insulting it, you're not even thinking about it, you're just going to go and then just move on without it, because it will hold you back the hardest, because you want everything to be Jewish centric, but it's based on, like, the Christians are very misguided. And nobody's going to bat an eye and be like, well, actually, like the early Christians and this, there's like some misunderstandings. And so this, or dispensationalism is just bullshit. Just heavy duty bullshit. But somebody told people that, and people just believe it just because they didn't really like think about it. Like, you know, if you go to math class, you're not like calling bullshit on the math. You just 2 and 2's 4, and it's not a conspiracy theory, right? So we don't, like, there's certain things that can't aren't even on, they're not even like things you consider to question. Like the Bible is about Jewish people. Like, well, I'm going to say no. But that's just a misinterpretation of the concept of Judah. So it's not even like a big thing. It's just you take one thing and then all of a sudden everything else is off. So, like, when I tell you that Moses is communism, or the people, well, he would be a man, so he would be more like a socialist revolutionaries. He would be something akin to that. Who, because of his shitty attitude, doesn't make it to the promised land. And it's Joshua that does the conquering. And communism does in fact collapse, but the saving of a certain group of people from the corruption of the West during this 20th century does occur, right? So there is like a reincorporation into society that's occurring, but there's still like a strange separation between East and West. And so there becomes this like, and that's why it's almost impossible for me to explain any of this until you really see. For example, if we go here, and then after you have a third of mankind, so a third of the nation, so this third, who's not part of the 66.6% of the Western capitalistic group, would be the 33.3% of the communist world, right? And so they were spared from these horrors of comic books and G.I. Joes and Ninja Turtles. But the four angels released an army of 200 million. And so most people are looking for a future conflict with one army with 200 million people, and that's just fucking preposterous. However, and I showed this in the video, there is clearly at least 200 million participants in World War II. That's the amazing part. There's no other moment in human history that can... Now, some people say the 200 million is just sort of non-literal. Fine. But that's a big damn army one way or the other. And there's only one time that that many combatants have ever occurred. You would need everybody involved in this fight. You would need four angels from the four corners of the golden altar of the Lord to make that occur. So, in here, you had the army of 200 million, and I saw the horses in the vision, and those who sat on them had breastplates. So horses in this case is going to represent the armies in the field of battle. So the horse is just representing the players of the war. So we've had several war vocabulary words. This is just a new one. So anytime you see the horse, it is referring to combatants. So in this case, the people that are doing the fighting had breastplates, meaning they had flags. They had, like, the breastplate is where you would put your signal. In this case, those breastplates are fiery red, hyacinth blue, and sulfur yellow. And this is one of the ways where I was like, oh shit, has anybody looked at this? Because that's so obvious. if you go and look, let's see if I can go. Man, that's good. Is that I'm just gonna let this play from here. So if we just watch this, just think about what it is I'm showing you. These would be the main combatants. I had a huge list, and I had to just sort of say, yeah, but if I'm playing Call of Duty, who are actually represented? You know, France and Italy don't really, yes, they're there, but they're not who we think of. We think of the 5 countries. We have the Nazis, the Japanese, and notice that white and black are not colors. So the only colors that you're going to see, and I'll go back one more time, the only colors you will see are red, red, red and blue, red and yellow, red and blue. And it's not just any red, it's fiery red. Go look it up, right? It's a very specific red. Hyacinth blue is a very specific blue. And look again as it streams through the flags. You're going to notice that it's literally the same blue on the American and English flags. And the yellow. So you have Germany, Japan, Great Britain, and America. And that's what I'm saying. Of those 200 million people, where are they from? They're from these countries of the world engaged in this fight over why was there a fight? Because the British and the Germans and the Americans and the Soviets and the Japanese were all trying to break free, right? The Japanese had essentially created an emperor that was largely a figurehead. By this point, the King of England was no longer the powerhouse. His absolute monarchy had this, you know, his that quickly with the with Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth II, it became painfully obvious that she was no longer Queen Elizabeth I, right? This was a highly reduced monarchy. America was created on no monarchy, and the Soviet Union was created on the death of a king. Like literally they shot the king in the head, and they killed the people with money, even though they were funded by the people with money. So it's like that vision at the end that I showed you, right? That sums it up. These people fought to kill the Germans, right? That is what this mainly was about. And then you essentially have Joseph's 2 children, Ephraim and Manasseh. And they just killed the last vestige of Jacob, the last vestige of the Roman world, just died in this new global order, this Bretton Woods global order, this American hegemonic capitalistic order is now emerging with a new enemy who happens to be their ally, because the old enemy is gone, and so the new enemy is the forces arrayed against the money. And there's a lot more to that, But you can see how and I keep hinting at this, and I wish I'm already way over time on this, so I'm gonna just Germany plays a pivotal role in understanding Jesus and the crucifixion of Jesus and the death of Jacob, and understanding what Jesus represents. Like, there's a lot. It's not just Jesus is Germany. Jesus is not Germany, but Jesus is Germany in a sense. And so imagine this would be the craziest thing of everything I said on this video. Imagine Jesus didn't die in 33 AD or 27 AD. Imagine Jesus died December 25th, 1944. And it's after 3 days from that he rises again. Or imagine Jesus dies November 11th, 1918, and it's after 3 days he rises from there. We'll get there, but I'm pretty sure it's the end of World War II, when the veil of the temple. So Jesus isn't Germany, but the temple is. The temple of Europe. The center of that temple. So each temple period represents a certain Israel. And the tribes of Israel. And that temple was torn into, split east and west, West Germany and East Germany. And you had your new division right in the center of the old European world that dominated for so long, was now secondary to the emerging powers of America and the Soviet Union. So, to wrap this thing up, hopefully soon, so that's what the colors mean, and then the heads of lions. And so in the video I attempted to show you a lion laying down and how it represented the shape of a tank, and I don't disagree with that. And out of the mouths came fire, smoke, and brimstone, and by a third of mankind was killed by. And so I was attempting to show you that fire, smoke, and brimstone, for the powers in their mouth and in their tails, for their tails were like serpents. And I was showing you that guns and cannons and all of these contraptions of the industrialization of war are in fact the tails of the serpents, and serpents would be merchants. And so the tails of the merchants have heads, and with them they do harm. And that's kind of what this is saying, for the power is in their mouth, it's in their speaking, it's in their propaganda, and in their armaments. For their armaments are a form of commerce. And what did the Soviet Union and the United States become most important for the rest of the 20th century? And what happened is they became the two big arms dealers, and there was perpetual warfare, and America is literally an empire of war. And that's a different, and that's where you get the beast of the sea, the army of capitalism versus the beast of the land, even though they were shown to be working together, and I can show you how that works. So the army of communism and the army of capitalism. And so this symbolism, but I'm backing this up with Genesis and Joseph and Jacob and Isaac and Abraham and Moses, like Elijah and Elisha. Well, I won't even get into Elisha. That's a whole bag of worms there. So it's like the world is all included in this book, and it's crazy, and I sound like the craziest person you ever met. And just do this, just have fun, embrace it, and try to see. I told you it's a rabbit hole, and it's not a short drop and a sudden stop. So I believe she took a nap and sat in a chair, and there was probably some food, and she passed the rabbit a couple of times. Like, it's a long way to go when you have a whole lot of things that you don't know, that you don't even know why you know them. How many hours have you devoted your life to understanding reality? Does any of it make sense? Of course it could. Like, simulation theory is quite in vogue. If it's a simulation, wouldn't, like, I'm not saying it is, but if God is all, somebody tapped into something. We're playing out the book. And it's you just have to understand the words. But people don't want to hear that. They just want to hear that Jesus will come back with an army in the sky that somehow everybody will see. Like, symbolism is way cool. Like, how awesome is it that World War II and electricity made the cut? Napoleon and the American Revolution and the French Revolution, like, it's in there. Visigoths and the Normans and the Vikings and the Romans and the Greeks. Oh, the Romans and the Greeks. Yeah, and the Soviets and the Chinese and the Vietnamese. What? I can show you the Ark of the Covenant, just like I showed you the Ark of Noah. Right, these are visual cues. It's not just taking the red pill. When you take the red pill, everything you know dies. Like, in order to understand the Bible, even if you don't like what I'm saying, you're never going to understand. If it's what everybody's saying, then there's no mystery. There's nothing interesting happening. You're just going to live for a while, work a lot, and then die. Having learned nothing, having experienced nothing other than utter basic consumerism, and you've probably devoted a good chunk of your adult life to going through feeds of somebody else's Instagram, wishing you were them, even though they're all pretending to do a life that's cool. There's interesting things happening. Oh, I forgot to mention television and social media and the internet. They all made the cut too. Do I still have anybody? No. Any feedback on any of this? Is anybody out there? Am I literally getting I didn't call myself Scott the Revelator because I'm a pompous asshole. I wish somebody else would see this. Just somebody see this. So cool.